Okay, I'm going to tell you the story of this envelope. Oh, this is the wrong envelope. It has nothing on it, but it's one of those. Back in March, I had the privilege of going to Berlin with my son Oliver, who's in the back there. We visited lots of museums, science and technical museums and others, and I got re-interested in letterpress printing, because they all have letterpress printing setups. So I bought myself a letterpress. In fact, I was given a letterpress by my friend Joe. It's the old letterpress from the Prince County Hospital, and this is some of the gear that came with the letterpress. This is a typeface, metal type called Spartan. This is 6-point, this is 12-point. Down on the bottom here on the left, you have some spacing, N's and M's if you've done any typography yourself. And on the right-hand side on the bottom, you have punctuation at 6 and 12-point. So I decided I wanted to print some envelopes with my letterpress for my business, which is called Reinvented, if you can read backwards. And this is how you typeset. You take little bits of type out of the type boxes and you set them in this thing called a composing stick. You'll notice that there's a notch there, and that tells you whether you've got the letters the right way up. You'll notice that they read backwards, but otherwise you just set them in right side up the right way. So this is the impression that I'm going to make in the top left-hand corner of my envelopes. You notice I'm holding it here with my thumb so everything doesn't fall apart. You'll also notice it's a rectangle, and between the lines of type are strips of lead. That's the leading. Again, if you've used desktop publishing, you'll know that term. So here's the type in the composing stick, and down on the bottom is something called a chase, and it's just a metal rectangle that I'm going to slip into my printing press in just a couple of slides from now. Up on the top is some wooden furniture, and there's some things called coins, which I'll show you in just a second. And the idea is that I'm going to take this, stick it in there, put some furniture around it, and lock it all into place. And so you've got the type in the middle, you've got the furniture all arranged around the sides, and you've got these lockable coins, and they lock like many other magical things in the world with Allen keys. And the idea is that you tighten everything up, and there should be no jiggling when you're done this, because if there's jiggling when you lift it all up, all the type will fall out. And I had to do that about 25 times before I realized that was the case. This is my printing press. It came out of a closet in Prince County Hospital mere days before it was torn down. It's an Adana Eight Five. Adana was a British company. It made printing presses in England between 1922 and 1999. This one's in pretty good shape. It's called an 8-5 because it can print pieces of paper up to 8 inches by 5 inches. So here's the sort of the guts of the printing press. You see that chase that I was talking about up on the front, up at the top, it just snaps in. And I've got the furniture and the type there. On the bottom, that's a piece of oiled paper called tympan. It's nothing really special about it other than it's shiny. And underneath the tympan is just some packing material that creates a nice bed for the type to dig into. So I'm ready to print, almost. On the right-hand side is a tub of ink that I bought over the internet for $16 from a guy in Colorado. It's rubber-based ink, so you see on the left-hand side I have Varsol and I have rags because at the end of this process, 2 or 3 slides from now, I'm going to be all messy and there's going to be ink all over that ink disc at the top, there's going to be ink all over that roller on the right, and I'm going to need to clean up. Now I'm ready to start printing. So I can take a very, 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 very tiny amount of ink and stick it on the ink disc and roll it around. And literally, like I'm talking smaller than my small little fingernail here, because if you put too much ink, it's a life of ruin. You can easily add new ink, you can't take ink away. So I stick some ink on there, I roll it around, I get a nice even surface. You see now I've inked up on the ink disc, and now I've added my rollers. The rollers that came with the printing press from Prince County Hospital were all beaten to hell. So I wrote away to a company in England called Caslon, which bought the assets of the Adana company, and they sent me these HD rollers. And so you can see I put the rollers onto the press and I've rolled them back and forth with a handle, and I make a couple of test prints. And you'll notice that this is the first test print I made, and you'll see the word reinvented is too far to the right. So I actually had to take the chase off the press, unlock everything, stick a little metal shim in there to move it back to the other side. You'll notice that there's some problems with the letter E and the letter A there. I can't really do anything about that because that's just worn metal type. So I have to live with that. That's an artifact of the process. So this is a zoom in on the tympan here, and the last thing I do before I start printing is I print one final impression on the tympan itself. And the reason I do that is because I need to know where I'm going to stick the envelope on the press. This is called a lay gauge, this stick, and that's what allows me to adjust the up and down, and then I need to get a visual of how I'm going to do the right and the left. So I unscrew those 2 screws there, and I move the lay gauge until I've got the up and the down right. You see there's a little pen mark there that I made on the tympan paper itself, and that gets me the right and the left right, and now I'm almost ready to print. We'll take a little pause here. Envelopes are 3D. I didn't realize this until I printed my first test print on an envelope. You can see that there's this flap here, and so if you imagine that as a nice flat printing press, it is in fact not flat at all. So the way I solved this is I just took a business card size piece of cardstock and stuck it into every envelope as I was printing, and that creates a much more even printing surface. So here's 40 envelopes. I bought the envelopes at Shoppers Drug Mart for $3.60 75 cents, I think. And I printed them, and they, I didn't spend a lot of time doing this, so it's not a perfect printing job. There's some variability. Variability is nice. It's sort of an artifact of the letterpress process, but I could have worked a little harder. And you'll see on this zoom in, you'll see that there's sort of some variability in the inking on the reinvented as you go from right to left. There are those letter A's and the letter E there that I pointed out earlier that are just, again, they're just sort of worn metal type, and I can't do much about them. I could probably find some other A's and E's in my box of type, but overall, I'm generally, I'm pleased with that. Didn't take any electricity either, so I was happy about that. But you might think, well, now I've got my 40 envelopes, I'm all ready to go home, but really I'm only about half to 2/3 of the way through the process at this point, because now I've got ink all over everything. And it's rubber-based ink, so I just can't run it under the tap. So the first thing I have to do is pull the rollers off the press and gather all together all the inky things. There's an inky ink disc. My hands are probably covered with ink. And I take Varsol, low odor Varsol, I recommend, so you don't stink up the office. And this is basically the waste product of the letterpress printing process, in addition to like the 40 or so other envelopes that I didn't show you because the ones that didn't work. But I put some gloves on to keep my hands nice and healthy, and I just rub everything down and I keep wiping it off until I'm done. And then the final process is to put all the type away. The people at the Prince County Hospital, I must say, in retrospect, didn't do a very good job at this. So a lot of my type drawers sort of have letter N's in the letter M box. But I just go through each letter and put it back in its right place. I put away all the furniture. I put the leading back in the leading box. And when all is said and done, I have 40 envelopes. Thank you very much.